In a world where animals had transformed into mutated monsters, humanity had evolved in response, gaining the ability to control these creatures. The aspiration of many was to become a powerful monster trainer. Among them was Gong, a young man who shared that same dream, coupled with a unique and broken ability known as the Monster Pet Evolution System. This system granted him knowledge of every monster's weaknesses, giving him an unprecedented edge. Now it was time for him to take charge and tame monsters of his own. 3 years ago, the living beings of Earth underwent a sudden and unprecedented change. Out of nowhere, animals and plants evolved into new, extraordinary forms. Some developed elemental attributes, others gained heightened physical abilities, and some even grew to gigantic sizes. Humans, however, remained unchanged and struggled to keep pace with these new threats. To prevent global extinction and maintain balance, nature gave humans a special gift, the ability to awaken powers that allowed them to control the very monsters threatening their existence. Those who possessed this power could command even the most dangerous creatures, provided they met certain requirements. People with this ability came to be known as Imperial Ambassadors. In Class 3 of Chang'an 3rd Senior High School, the head teacher, Morang Chui, addressed her students about this very phenomenon. She explained how the awakening of this power had ushered humanity into a new era. She also warned her students that all the information she shared would appear on an upcoming test. Morang Chui then mentioned a monster trainer exam scheduled for the following day, inviting any interested students to attend with their parents. With that, she dismissed the class for the day. Among the students was Gong Pang, an 18-year-old with a singular goal to become an Imperial Ambassador. Walking home through a narrow alley, he pondered a strange issue that had been troubling him lately. Not long ago, he had begun seeing a mysterious interface, resembling a guide window from a video game. It appeared during his daily life, introducing itself as the Monster Evolution System, and urging Gong to make good use of it. Doubt filled his mind. Was this real, or merely a hallucination brought on by stress? His thoughts were interrupted as he entered his apartment building and climbed the stairs. There on the landing, he came face to face with a giant spider. Its sheer size and detail left no room for doubt. This was real. Gang recalled that the creature was a pet raised by an old lady named Grandin, who lived in the building. According to Miss Morang, they were usually gentle. Yet, without warning, the spider attacked. Gang dodged and fled up the stairs, narrowly avoiding a web that shot past him. Panic surged through him, but he remembered the system window mentioning the spider's weakness, fire. Thinking quickly, he pulled a lighter from his pocket and flung it at the creature. The flame slowed it for a brief moment, but it was not enough to stop a giant spider. As the pursuit continued, Gang realized the spider was somehow angry with him, though he couldn't understand why. Still, he remained confident that if he could reach his apartment, he would be safe. He called out desperately to Big Purple, whoever or whatever that might be. At that precise moment, as the spider leapt toward him, a massive purple tentacle burst from his apartment door, slamming it open. Standing tall, the creature revealed itself, not a tentacle, but a gigantic centipede-like monster. Its presence terrified the spider, giving Gang the confidence he needed. Looking down at his attacker, he calmly asked if it still wanted to play, as the massive centipede loomed behind him, ready to defend him. The spider, terrified of the massive purple creature standing behind Gang, quickly scurried away. One couldn't blame it. Big Purple was intimidating, but as soon as the spider disappeared, the once formidable centipede underwent a transformation. Its massive, terrifying form shrank into a chibi version of itself. Gang blinked, stunned. He had to admit it, this tiny, adorable version of Big Purple was completely endearing. The threat had been neutralized, and Gong finally had a moment to interact with his companion. Big Purple, or Doi as Gong called him, communicated telepathically, a gift born from the recent evolution of both animals and humankind. Once a monster bonded with a person, they could speak to each other without words. And what did Doi say? The same thing every pet seemed to say: he was hungry. Though moments ago Doi had been terrifying, in this chibi form, he was utterly harmless. This was his non-combat form. Every monster had two forms: a combat form, designed for fighting, and a non-combat form, which reduced their size and energy consumption. This allowed them to conserve energy for battles, or even heal minor injuries over time. Delighted, Gang showered Doi with affection, patting his head and promising him a delicious meal. Doi, obedient and eager, moved to his designated cabinet as Gang stepped into the kitchen. Here, Gang's culinary skills would shine. He poured every ounce of talent into preparing an elaborate, mouth-watering meal. The food looked so tempting that even the centipede in his chibi form stared at it with hearts in his eyes. Doi struggled to eat slowly enough to avoid choking, but his enthusiasm was endearing. After the meal, Gong glanced at his status window, the Monster Pet Evolution System. A particular detail froze him in place. According to the system, Doi could be promoted from a normal quality monster to an elite quality one. In this new world, monsters were ranked by potential ordinary, elite, and perfect. If Doi could evolve to elite quality, perhaps he could one day reach perfect quality, breaking through the legendary barrier and potentially becoming a leader among monsters. Eager to seize this opportunity, Gang examined the promotion requirements. 3 core items were necessary to initiate the process. 2 Yin Sheng Zheng grass and thunderwood were relatively easy to acquire with some money. The third, a thunder crystal core, was a far greater challenge. These cores were created from the remains of fallen monsters and were exceedingly rare. Even ordinary cores were extremely expensive, and a thunder core could easily cost 10 credits or more. To put this into perspective, each credit in the unified global currency system was worth 10,000 affiliate coins. When Gang's parents had passed away in an accident, he had received 20 credits as compensation. He had lived frugally ever since, spending only 9, leaving him with 11 credits to his name. While this meant he could afford the Thunder Crystal Core, doing so would leave him nearly penniless. A sudden realization struck him. If the monster pet evolution system was truly accurate, and it had been so far, he could use it to become a top-tier monster trainer. With access to such detailed knowledge, he could master monster promotion, a mystery that had baffled trainers for years, and earn unimaginable wealth. Remembering head teacher Morang's warning about the upcoming monster trainer exam, Gang acted quickly. He logged into the school website and registered as an examinee with just minutes to spare. The next morning, Gang, accompanied by Doi, knocked on the door of his neighbor's apartment. After a moment, Tang, a woman friendly with Gang due to their living arrangement, answered, smiling. She asked what he needed so early in the morning. Gang explained that he was taking the monster trainer exam and requested that she look after Doi for a few days in his absence. Tang, cheerful and cooperative, readily agreed. Gang thanked her sincerely, promising a dinner treat upon his return. He then rushed out of the building, confident that he could focus on the exam with peace of mind. However, as soon as Gang left, Tang's demeanor changed. Her friendly smile vanished, replaced with a condescending glare. She stared down at Doi, venom in her voice, questioning how Gang could end up with such a pathetic little bug of a monster. Angered by her words, Doi leapt forward to attack, but Tang, prepared and calm, reverted to her earlier gentle manner, soothing him with a few reassuring pets. Later, Tang picked up her phone and dialed a number. As soon as the line connected, she reported to an elderly man named Sav. She informed him that Gang Pang had become the master of a monster, an ordinary quality, purple-backed, yellow-clawed centipede. Even saying it out loud was a mouthful. Without missing a beat, the old man on the line reacted even more dramatically than Tang had earlier. He complained about the low potential of such a creature and instructed her to speak to Gang about the matter. In response, Tang revealed a crucial truth. Gang was just like his grandfather, the old man himself. Despite appearing indifferent to many things, Gang was stubborn when it came to something he treasured. The centipede, a gift from his late parents, was certainly one of those treasures. Shifting the topic, Tang questioned whether the old man's work was still unfinished. In her opinion, all those who were disobedient should simply be eliminated and replaced with loyal workers. There was no shortage of such replacements, she reasoned. Brushing off her own thoughts as mere speculation, she reassured the old man that Gang would be safe as long as she was around. Meanwhile, in a luxurious office befitting a CEO, the intimidating old man hung up the phone. He turned to his assistant, ordering her to relay certain instructions to the laboratories. After she left, he gazed at a photograph of himself and his grandson when Gang was still a child. Smiling at the memory, he made a silent promise within a year. Everything that kept him away would be resolved, and he would finally return to his beloved grandson. After that, no one would ever be able to harm him. Back in Chang'an City, at the monster division, Gang found himself among thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of hopeful monster trainers. Almost everyone around him seemed eager to take the exam. Suddenly, he heard his name being called. Turning, he was surprised to see his friend Li Zigong, accompanied by Zigong's sister Li Honggu and their mother, Zhang Hong. They were here for the exams as well. Curious, they asked Gang if he was here only to observe. His answer shocked them. He planned to take the exam himself. Placing a hand on his shoulder, Miss Hong encouraged him, saying that ambition was admirable and that he could become Chang'an's youngest monster trainer. Before they could continue, a spoiled young man approached. Speaking condescendingly, he questioned whether they were even fit to participate. Zigong bristled with anger, but Gong merely mocked him, causing the arrogant youth to turn and storm away. Zigong Hong explained that the man was Wang Shu, heir to the Wang Group, who had already failed this exam 4 times. His behavior was nothing more than jealousy and wounded pride. The entrance doors then opened, revealing a suited man with an eye patch. Fang Shu, the chief examiner of Chang'an's Monster Trainers Division. Inside the grand hall, the examinees took their seats as Fang Shu began the test. Speaking into a microphone, he explained that the exam had 2 stages, a written test and a physical test, the latter requiring martial arts combat skills. The written test would appear on a large screen behind him. 3 videos would play, each showing a monster for a brief time. The examinee's task was to identify each creature by its appearance alone, and record everything they knew about it. With that, the examination began. The first video displayed a large aquatic monster swimming in the ocean. Before anyone could fully analyze it, the clip ended. Fang Shu announced that the students had 30 minutes to complete their answers. Chaos erupted as most examiners struggled with the difficulty of the task. Annoyed, Fang Shu warned that any further noise would result in immediate expulsion. Among the crowd, Wang Shu maintained a smug smile. Despite the test being exceptionally difficult, he had obtained the questions in advance, a clear display of corruption. However, his confidence faltered when he noticed Gong Pang, the very boy who had mocked him earlier, smiling and exuding confidence. For Gong, this test was straightforward. With the monster pet evolution system and his own subconscious knowledge working together, he could see everything about each monster, its name, preferences, diet, and even weaknesses. Calmly, he recorded his observations, starting with the storm dolphin, then the mighty gorilla, and finally the S-mantis. As the time limit approached, Gang's pen moved swiftly across the page, completing the written portion with ease. Fang Shu called for the collection of their papers. Gang Pang, fully confident, knew he had aced the written test. After all, he had the entire encyclopedia of monsters at his disposal through the system. An hour later, all exams had been graded and the results tallied. From his position on the stage, Fang Shu began announcing the names of the examinees who had passed the first stage. Name after name was called, including Zhang Hong and Wang Shu. Slowly, Gang's confidence wavered. He hadn't heard his own name yet. Finally, the list seemed complete. Wang Shu immediately mocked him, assuming that Gang had failed, but Fang Shu spoke again, asking, "Who is Gang Pang?" The entire room fell silent. Smiling, Fang Shu congratulated Gang on achieving a perfect score. The hall erupted into a mixture of envy, awe, and surprise. Gang turned his attention to Wang Shu, locking eyes with him. With a calm tone, he reintroduced himself and apologized for surpassing him, leaving the spoiled heir speechless. With the first stage complete, the thousands of examinees had now been narrowed down to a select few. Fang Shu led them to the location of the second stage, a massive circular arena, large enough to fit several houses within its walls. At the center, the examinees gathered as Fang Shu explained the task. Around the edges of the arena were monsters provided by the association. The task would last an entire week. They were to evolve the monsters assigned to them, increasing their rank within the time limit. The association would supply all necessary materials, but failure to improve the monster's quality would incur a severe penalty. The examinee would have to pay the full market price of the resources used. Overuse of materials would also count as failure. With a clap of his hands, Fang Shu summoned another official from the Chang'an Monster Division. The man carried a red-brown box containing rune cards, which the examinees would draw at random to determine their assigned monsters. In theory, this ensured fairness, but in practice, schemes and sabotage were common. When it was Gang's turn, a plan to undermine him became apparent. Wang Shu smirked from behind, while Len carried out a subtle sabotage, using a tiny invisible chameleon under his control. Len pushed a specific rune card into Gang's hand as he drew from the box. A faint smug grin curved Len's lips. Gong, however, remained undeterred. He and Zhang Hong would be sharing their room assignments. Following the announcement, they proceeded to their designated rooms as Fang Shu officially declared the physical exam underway. Outside room number 10, Gang met X1, a sincere man in charge of the room. X1 assured him that anything he needed during the exam would be provided. Swiping his room card, Gang entered and was immediately struck silent. Inside the cage was a beast engulfed in a shadowy aura of fear and anger, a red river ape. Viewing the creature's status window, Gang was shocked. The ape's condition was pitiful. Turning to XYN, he asked what had happened. XYN explained uneasily that the ape had been experimented on and abused so severely that waste and conflicting energy had accumulated in its body. According to the association's instructions, this was the only monster available for the exam. But in truth, plenty of other monsters existed. The ape had been deliberately selected as part of a scheme to sabotage Gang orchestrated to satisfy complaints from the Wang family. Despite the grim situation, XY assured Gang that arrangements could be made for the ape to take the physical exam next year, carrying over his written results. But Gang, undeterred by the challenge, was determined to succeed with this monster, no matter how difficult the task. Approaching the cage, he took in the state of the Red River ape, feeling a mixture of disgust and resolve. People, he realized, could be crueler than any monster. The Red River ape began howling in a mix of rage and fear, traumatized once again by its past abuse. To its surprise, Gang Pang simply reached through the cage bars and gently petted its head, smiling reassuringly. Calmly, he promised the ape that he would help it evolve. Eager to begin, Gang opened the ape's status window to review its promotion requirements. What he saw shocked him. Before him were not one but two promotion paths. One would result in a standard evolution, but the other was far darker, a path he had never even imagined possible for this creature. The normal evolution path required far too many resources to stay within the exam's limits. Considering the constraints, Gang's only viable option was to attempt the ultimate evolution and take a significant risk. According to the system, the dark lesions on the ape could be advanced to absorb yin energy, giving it a chance to evolve into an entirely new species, even from its lowest quality state. Studying the process in detail, Gang saw the steps required. The ape must consume a black candle herb in half portions with each of 3 meals per day for 3 days. Afterward, it needed to eat an elite-level undead monster crystal core. Finally, 8 units of luminous powder had to be mixed into sulfuric acid water in pairs, along with either 1 skeleton mushroom or 2 grass knots. When Gang handed the list to XYN, the man could only stare in disbelief. Every item was highly toxic. Was Gang attempting to train the ape, or kill it? Gang simply smiled and told him to have faith. After all, a strong disease required a strong cure, didn't it? 3 days later, several examinees had already failed and been removed from the facility. Some had made catastrophic mistakes, while others had simply been outclassed. Meanwhile, Gang and the Red River ape were thriving. The black candle herb had healed the ape's external wounds almost completely and elevated its spirit and condition to their peak. Even the undead monster core had begun to take effect. All that remained was the sulfuric acid bath. Gang held the key to the ape's cage, given to him by XYN. Unlike most association monsters, this ape's mental state was highly unpredictable, so Gang would have to release it at his own risk. After making the ape promise to behave, he unlocked the cage. The ape barreled out, rushing straight at him, but instead of attacking, it leapt onto Gang and hugged him. Patting the beast's head, Gang instructed it to follow as he led it to the bathroom. Inside, he revealed the vat of toxic sludge he had prepared for the bath, a substance so caustic it could vaporize anything that touched it. The ape, cautious yet curious, tested it by dropping a hair into the bath. The hair disintegrated instantly. Shocked, the ape begged Gang not to put it in. Gang, impressed by its intelligence, gently placed a hand on its head and reassured it that this was for its own good. Determined to make Gang proud, the ape stepped into the bath with resolve. Immediately, a miniature storm of smoke and darkness engulfed the room. The facility's fire alarm was triggered by the abnormally high smoke levels. Security teams rushed toward room 10, fire extinguishers in hand, while some examinees, including Wang Shu, eagerly followed, anticipating disaster for Gang. When the security team kicked open the door, they found no fire, only an immense cloud of black smoke. Emerging from the haze, Gang turned to see them and addressed XYN at the front. He apologized for the disruption, explaining that he had become completely absorbed in his task and hadn't even realized the alarm had gone off. Despite the chaos, he remained unharmed, a testament to his focus and the unusual bond he shared with the ape. Joan informed the others over his radio that room 10 was clear and asked them to dismiss the false alarm. The examinees who had followed the security team finally caught up and peered in from the doorway, observing Gang Pang. They whispered among themselves, concluding that the boy was simply too young and inexperienced. He had probably caused the alarm by accident. Wang Shu was delighted by this assumption, confident that Gang's experiment had failed, but to their shock, a massive, ghastly skeletal hand suddenly emerged from the vat of toxic materials, gripping the corner of the tub. It pulled forth the head and body of a brand new monster. The creature that emerged was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. A giant skeletal ape surrounded by a purple flame, its eye sockets and skull emitting darker, more intense flames. Susanna Monkey, Gang read aloud from the system notifications. The evolution was complete. The Red River ape had transformed into an elite-quality battle-bone dead ape. From that moment, Gang's suspicions were confirmed. As long as he had the proper materials, he could promote almost any monster at his discretion. He quickly began examining the ape's new form. Its larger body, metallic-like bones, and rock-solid aura made it an incredible specimen. Observers at the doorway shared his amazement. Lane was practically drooling, declaring that this was a previously unseen type of monster. Its status as a rare undead only made it more valuable. Fang Shu, however, regarded Gang Pang with a proud smile. While the monster's form was remarkable, it was even more impressive that the young trainer had achieved it. Realizing that the examiner was present, Gang quickly explained that he had completed the task assigned for the physical exam. Fang Shu's smile widened at the boy's enthusiasm and declared that Gang was proving himself worthy of being the first-ranked examinee. Suddenly the ape tugged at Gang's shirt, looking up at him with its new towering frame. Gong patted its finger and spoke to it reassuringly. Meanwhile, Legion schemed as usual, plotting to take the promoted monster for himself. Monsters evolved in the exam were usually given to association employees as rewards, but this one was far too rare and powerful to pass up. Before he could hatch a plan, Fang Shu intervened. Observing the bond between Gang and the ape, he recognized that the monster had grown dependent on Gang over the past few days, forming a connection that could not be ignored. Taking all factors into account, Fang Shu extended his hand toward Gang and declared that the ape would be given to him. Ziyan and Li Jin were flabbergasted. Such a decision had never occurred before. Gang, on the other hand, was left speechless. Managing only a quiet, "me." Fang Shu explained that the evolved ape was a completely new and unrecorded species. Its stats were unknown, but the evolution was successful. It was not a loss for Gang to receive it. Gang took a closer look at the ape's status window. Already at level 11, the ape, now elite quality, could be promoted to epic class once it reached level 20. Its appearance alone made it seem like an epic class creature. The trainer smiled, marveling at the success of Susanna Monkey. Joan approached from behind and encouraged Gang to accept the ape. It clearly wanted to stay with him. However, not everyone agreed. Lejin objected, citing association rules that such monsters should be reserved for employees. He also mentioned that the Red River ape had already undergone 6 prior experiments, implying its promotion might be suspect. Wang Shu quickly chimed in, arguing that the monster should have been eliminated long ago, making it impossible for someone as young as Gang to have caused its evolution. Legion tried to formulate a proper argument, but Wang Shu interrupted furiously, insisting that Gang Pang must have cheated. Fang Shu addressed the room, calmly asking how anyone could possibly achieve such a feat in the controlled setting of the exam, considering the task set before them. Realizing Wang Shu's blunder, Li Jin attempted to salvage their argument by claiming that the difficulty of promoting the Red River ape far exceeded the level expected for the exam. He suggested that Gang Pang had merely gotten lucky due to prior experience. Fang Shu, unimpressed, saw right through the flimsy excuse. He turned to Lei Jin, asking if he was seriously proposing to penalize Gang for simply demonstrating skills superior to the test. Flustered, Lei Jin scrambled for more excuses, but Fang Shu wasn't interested. Instead, he turned to Gang and encouraged the boy to go ahead and showcase his abilities as a monster trainer, effectively shutting down the opposition. Confident with Fang Shu's support and his own knowledge, Gang proceeded to mock both Lei Jin and Wang Shu. He explained exactly why the Red River ape had been brought to such a pitiful condition. Experiments had forced yin energy onto it, which happened to be its natural weakness. Neither Lei Jin nor Wang Shu had known this, so they could no longer claim superiority. Gang then detailed the innovative method he had used to promote the ape. Impressed, Fang Shu approached Gang and granted him an intermediate monster trainer certification, rather than a beginner one. However, Gang would need to travel to the Yang'an headquarters to receive it, as it was beyond Fang Shu's authority. Fang Shu then addressed Wang Shu and Lei Jin directly, revealing that he had known about their cheating and backhanded methods all along. With X-Wine ready to testify against them, they had no escape. Wang Shu was banned from taking the exam for 3 years, and Lei Jin was fired, never to work in the field again. Cheers erupted from the other examinees, who were glad to see justice served. Following the commotion, Fang Shu invited Gang to his office for a cup of tea. He apologized for the chaotic day and gave the boy a small favor in line with the president's instructions. At the Yang'an headquarters, Gang received his intermediate monster trainer certificate, with the Red River ape, now officially named Dumby, at his side. Dumby was the undead ape that had evolved under his care, giving Gang both a companion and a name to call it by. Reviewing the certification booklet on the bus ride home, Gang noticed an added bonus: having a certificate would grant him 3 full points on his college entrance exams. The monster trainer exam had provided him with an elite quality monster, a profitable reward, and even an identity token. He couldn't help but be impressed with the efficiency of the association. Normally, an organization of this scale would be far more bureaucratic and difficult to navigate. Fang Shu also had another request. He wanted Gang Pang to represent Shanghai City in the World Monster Trainers competition. The city had a worryingly low number of competent trainers, and they had never ranked notably in the tournament. With Gang's potential, however, Fang Shu was confident he could make waves. Initially hesitant, Gang worried about jumping straight into a global tournament after just becoming a trainer. Fang Shu, knowingly or by luck, mentioned offhandedly that even ranking in the tournament's top 10 would earn a reward of 10,000 credits. An enticing sum, that was all Gang needed to hear. He eagerly accepted, ready to take on the challenge, reminding himself, the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. Back on the bus, Gang began second-guessing whether participating in the tournament was truly worth it. A curious passenger approached Dumby, reaching out to touch the undead ape's bones. In response, Dumby effortlessly wrapped the man in a cocoon of string-like threads, leaving everyone else on the bus watching in awe. Turning to his companion, Gang petted Dumby and spoke gently. "This is all I can do to support you." He knew that with Dumby and Doi to feed and care for, it was his responsibility to provide for them. Despite the chaos, both monsters remained calm under his guidance, a testament to the bond they had formed and the trust they shared. Later, Georgia and Dumby were walking home after getting off at their station. As they moved along, Dumby suddenly shoved GA off the street and turned to face what he sensed as a threat. GA got up, walking back toward the ape, and thanked him for worrying, assuring Dumby that there was no danger. After all, the one Dumby had sensed was just another member of their little family, Dazzy. Except, Dazzy was very different now. Extremely different. Looking at the centipede, Georgia could only feel horror at the sight of the extremely fattened worm crawling toward him. What on earth had Tang Tang done to him? From the direction Dazzy had come, Tang Tang appeared, walking toward GA. As soon as she saw him, she told him that Dazzy and she had come to pick him up. When GA asked about Dazzy's state, she explained casually that she had simply made him healthy and strong by feeding him plenty of good food. After all, he had been far too skinny before. This, she explained, was the so-called feeder method. Terrifying. Gay glanced at Dazzy's status window. The words "extremely overnourished" stared back at him. There was no way this could be considered healthy. Tang Tang, ignoring his shock, asked how his exam had gone. Gay gave her a brief summary. Tang Tang was most surprised by the fact that he had jumped straight to an intermediate trainer from the start. Smiling warmly, she told him his growth rate had truly impressed her. She then decided it was time for a talk. Looking GA in the eyes, she asked if he knew why monster trainers held such high status. It was because, no matter how strong or weak their monsters, the creatures themselves were still monstrous. GA just blinked, barely processing the abstract reasoning. Skipping the rest of the conversation, he returned to his apartment. Inside, Georgia began performing the Imperial Monster Secret technique. With this ability, all damage received by a monster trainer could be transferred to their monster instead, though the range was limited and the activation required the monster's consent. It was a formidable skill, essentially granting near invincibility against normal attacks. As a monster evolved, its defense and vitality only increased, enhancing the effectiveness of the technique. With Dazzy, it felt almost like an invisible thread connected them. Sitting on his sofa, Georgia finally completed the ritual, forming the contract. He had to admit, it was strange that Tang Tang had obtained the scroll for him so casually. She must have a remarkable background. Looking down, Georgia saw Dazzy still in his extremely obese state. When he tried to speak to the centipede, Dazzy simply talked back. GA then had Dumby bring a mirror and placed it in front of Dazzy, forcing the centipede to confront his own reflection. The sight worked immediately. Dazzy was petrified by his appearance and collapsed on the floor, depressed. Feeling responsible, Georgia told Dazzy not to dwell on himself. Instead, he encouraged him to exercise and lose the extra weight. If Dazzy succeeded, Georgia promised to give him a quality upgrade and a promotion similar to what Dumby had received. In his mind, Georgia pictured Dazzy in his upgraded form, complete with wings, but there was no way that would happen until the weight was gone. The next day, Georgia joined Tang Tang as they headed to her company. Proud of his new monster trainer certification, Tang Tang had offered him a job there, which he was more than happy to accept. On the way, Tang Tang explained her previous business endeavors, failures all, but GA was amazed by her current company. Not only was it in the center of downtown with notoriously high rent, but it was also a luxurious building. Tang Tang casually mentioned the pay GA would receive for his work. Surprisingly, it was much higher than the market rate for trainer services, but she brushed it off. If it were anyone else, Georgia might have been suspicious. But Tang Tang had cared for him since he was an orphan 3 years ago. He trusted her. Moments later, they were greeted by a cute young lady named Shan Chuan Chuan, the receptionist. Tang Tang instructed her to show GA around properly before heading on ahead. Exasperated by Tang Tang's antics, but happy to be there, Georgia followed Chuan Chuan to the office. As she punched in his information, Georgia considered his rates for services. Given that his methods almost always guaranteed monster promotion, he felt the pricing was fair, though he knew he needed to earn a lot to repay Tang Tang someday. Chuan Chuan asked if he was sure about charging rates, triple the usual maximum. Before GA could answer, a man suddenly barged in, panicked, and demanded that GA cure his monster. He offered to pay 10 times the standard rate if GA could help. GA, unfazed, calmly told him that his registered triple rate was sufficient, especially for his first order. The man, desperate, presented his monster, a purple mouse with a severe injury on its side. GA examined the creature through its status window and recognized it as an elite-quality purple lightning rat. The system immediately warned him about dangerous conflicting mutations. Turning to the man, Georgia demanded to know what had caused this dangerous reaction. The man admitted to feeding the rat a blood jade mushroom to force a mutation, never expecting such a severe conflict. Ga shook his head. Ignorance wasn't innocence, pal. Luckily, with the system's help, Georgia was able to formulate a cure. After gathering all the facts, Georgia realized that the rat was indeed in the process of evolving. The blood attribute from the mushroom and the rat's own lightning attribute were clashing for dominance, tearing the creature apart from the inside. Using the system's suggested method, Georgia could transform the conflict into a complementary coexistence, allowing the rat's evolution to complete successfully. Turning to Chuan Chuan, he requested 5 shadow fruits, a red maple heart, a pair of thunder gold leaves, and 1 blood bat monster crystal core. Man, they really suck at naming things in this world, he thought. Chuan Chuan rushed off to collect the materials while Ga turned to Ma and reminded him of the rules for such services. All the materials would be paid for in full by the client. Ma, solely concerned with his pet's health, assured him that was no problem. Once the materials arrived, Georgia took them and the rat to the treatment room. There, he prepared a pot over the stove, and for dramatic effect held a butcher's knife over the rat. Horrified, Chuan and Ma stepped back, only for Ga to plop the rat into the pot. Ma lunged forward in panic, but Ga, laughing, assured him it wasn't stew or soup at all. It was a medicinal bath, and the heat from the stove would help the rat absorb the nutrients. 10 minutes later, the pot's lid exploded off as a purple blur shot out, tearing through the room. Thanks to Ga's method, the conflicting mutations had harmonized, and the rat had evolved into a perfect quality lightning blood rat, a monster with dual attributes. Ga informed Ma that with a little training, the rat could even become a litter-level monster. Overjoyed, Ma thanked Ga profusely. Once the fees were settled, he asked to make another appointment for a different monster the next day. Unfortunately for him, Georgia had classes tomorrow, so he couldn't help. Curious, Ma asked what class he was taking, considering Ga was already such an impressive monster trainer. Ga calmly replied that he was a third-year high school student, then walked away. Both Chuan and Mei were left rooted in place, shivering at just how capable Ga was, even as a student. Later, Tang was seen in her apartment, fiddling with a small golden crystal core of high quality. Turning to her personal monster, she instructed it to deliver the item to Ga. The creature crawled across the outside wall and silently dropped the crystal core through Ga's apartment window. Coincidentally, or perhaps intentionally, the core landed right in front of Dazi. Curious, Dazi crawled over and, without caution or concern for safety, chomped down on the crystal core like it was the tastiest thing he'd ever seen. Instantly, he began shivering violently in agony. Dumby watched from behind, terrified for his sibling. Meanwhile, Georgia was returning to his apartment after shopping for his monsters. With 15 pounds of cedar pine needles, he could feed Dumby for a solid month. Since Dumby had only just evolved to elite quality, Georgia planned to wait before attempting the next promotion. On the other hand, Dazi's promotion was a concern. He needed the crystal cores to promote him, which probably wouldn't be an option for a while. However, Georgia was in for a surprise. As he neared his apartment, he felt a sudden sense of distress through the telepathic link with his monsters. Panicking, he dropped the groceries and sprinted back home, slamming the door open. "Dumby," he yelled, terrified. But the ape was fine. The distress signal had been triggered by Dazi, who lay on the floor writhing in pain, drooling and foaming at the mouth. As Gay watched, a system notification popped up. Explaining the situation, Dazi was evolving after consuming a large amount of blood and flesh from the lightning Vajra centipede, along with a monster crystal core. Shocked, Georgia could only wonder where Tang had gotten such an expensive material. Sure enough, she appeared in his doorway, holding the groceries he had dropped, proving she had been watching him all along. J.A. couldn't decide if the gesture was wholesome or creepy, leaning heavily toward creepy before turning to face her. Gang was baffled, asking why on earth she would do something like that without even consulting him first. She simply replied that he wouldn't have accepted it if she had asked beforehand. After placing down his groceries and nervously scolding him for being reckless, she scurried backward and rushed into her apartment, barely managing a goodbye. With her gone, Gao turned his attention to Dazi. He firmly smacked the centipede on the head, warning him not to eat just anything he came across in the future. Then, determined to prevent Dazi from suffering like he currently was, Gao began searching for a way to speed up Dazi's evolution. Fortunately for the centipede, the system provided exactly the information he needed. After rummaging through his possessions for a while, Gao finally found it, a medium-grade purple poison flower. By grinding it into a medicinal juice and feeding it to Dazi, the evolution could be completed. It almost felt too convenient, as if the plot demanded it. Sure enough, as soon as Gao blended the flower and fed it to Dazi, the centipede evolved instantly into an elite-quality purple-backed lightning centipede. Despite the successful evolution, the now much larger Dazi collapsed onto the floor, exhausted from the ordeal he had just endured. Seeing Dazi so tired, Dumbly grew concerned, but Gazi reassured him that Dazi was simply worn out and would recover soon. While Dazi rested, Gaozi fed dumbly the food he had prepared for him earlier. Later, Dazi awoke to find both his master and brother asleep on opposite sides of the couch. An idea sparked in his mind, and the centipede grabbed a blanket. Approaching the couch carefully, Tang, watching from the window, could only worry about what was coming next. Gao soon felt a blanket being draped over him, and to his surprise, Dazi wrapped himself around his master for a cuddle. The moment was so overwhelmingly cute that Gao could hardly believe it. Meanwhile, back at Chang in 3rd Senior High, the principal was in a heated argument with a government official over a pressing issue, the proposed reform of the school system. While the principal opposed putting students in harm's way, the official explained the necessity. In peacetime, people their age were considered children, but the looming war would force them to become the country's primary defensive force. Soon humanity's technology would no longer be enough to counter the vicious beasts mutating in the wilds. Unlike the monsters in the cities, these mutations were violent and battle-focused. If the system reforms were delayed, it would already be too late. Meanwhile, in class, Gao Peng found himself the center of everyone's attention. Initially confused, a friend explained that his exploits in the monster trainer exam had been reported in the newspaper, practically turning him into a celebrity. Blushing from the praise, Gao accepted the attention graciously. His friend then asked for a small favor which Gao instantly refused, either because they were really good friends, or because he simply didn't negotiate. Before the situation could escalate, head teacher Meringue appeared behind him. With a rolled-up paper in hand, she called for the students to settle down and made an important announcement. From now on, schools around the world were undergoing urgent reforms. The second year of high school and above would include a new course on monsters, and a special recruitment channel for the military would be established. Top students could be directly recruited into the military, and military coaches would arrive soon. Anyone interested in joining as a special student was to see her after class. As chaos settled among the students discussing this news, Miss Meringue asked to speak with Gao Peng privately. In the hallway, she began by congratulating him on his achievements in the monster trainer exam, noting that even the principal had praised him by name. She wanted him to represent the school as a freshman for the incoming students from 7th High. Sweating bullets, Gao declined, explaining that such a high-profile task was far beyond his comfort zone. In fact, he planned to apply as one of the special students for military training. Concerned, Miss Meringue questioned why he would choose such a dangerous path despite his exceptional grades and intermediate monster trainer certification. He could easily secure a prestigious job or enter a top academy. Clenching his fists, Gao explained that the conventional path was too slow for him. He wanted to grow stronger quickly through actual combat training, and he could take both exams simultaneously. Smiling at her determined student, Miss Meringue expressed her respect for his decision but hoped he would consider her advice. In moments like these, the presence of a caring, wholesome teacher reminded everyone just how rare such guidance was. Later that afternoon, all the special students gathered in the schoolyard to meet the military coaches. While waiting, Gao ran into his friend from earlier, Tan Changjin, and the two quickly ended up in a rather petty argument. It was still unclear whether they were truly good friends or just constantly clashing. At that moment, an armored tank rolled into the yard. A colonel, the commanding officer, stepped forward and took position behind a podium. He began by congratulating the students for having the courage to show up, but immediately followed with a harsh reality check. He told them that most of them did not have what it took to become imperial ambassadors, and warned them of the humiliation they would face when confronted with true monsters in the wild. The students erupted with angry and offended complaints, but the colonel offered to show them firsthand. His subordinates brought forth a giant muscular white hound with glowing red eyes, a terrifying sight. Colonel Chen, taking the wolf's leash in his own hands, ordered his soldiers to set up a 10-centimeter thick 3-type armor plate for a demonstration. Once everything was ready, he crouched to the wolf's level and commanded it to attack. Before he could even finish speaking, the hound dashed toward the target at insane speed and ripped the armor plate to shreds. The students were stunned, their previous confidence shattered. From his position, Colonel Chen called out, explaining that this was the power of a trained beast, and that the monsters they would face in the future would be equal or even stronger. He then gave them a final chance to back out. Heads bowed in shame. Dozens of students walked away. Yet Colonel Chen's expression softened as he assured them that choosing to leave was not wrong. Studying was an honorable path as long as it was pursued sincerely. Among the students who remained, however, his demeanor changed. With a fierce, almost demonic smile, he warned that anyone leaving now would be counted as a deserter. Later that day, Gao Peng returned home after an exhausting first day of training under the colonel. According to him, 1,200 students would be eliminated from enrollment across the city's institutes within just a month, a staggering rate. As he looked around, Gao realized that all the cedar pine needles he had bought for Dumbly were gone. After searching the fridge thoroughly, he found only a single needle remaining. Turning to his monsters, he demanded an explanation. Dazi gleefully admitted that he had eaten them all while Gao was away. Gao scolded Dumbly gently, but the poor ape was already too ashamed to respond. Instead, Gao reminded him to speak first before eating next time. Sitting down, he reviewed the consumption rates of both his monsters. Dumbly needed 600 pounds of cedar pine needles to evolve again, and he was getting close. The faster he consumed them, the sooner they could move on to the next evolution. After evolving though, he would require even more valuable materials, a real headache in terms of both resources and money. As for Dazi, he needed 200 pounds of lightning flower fruit to reach perfect quality. It was still an expensive resource, and post-evolution, he would face the same challenge as Dumbly. Raising a family of monsters, Gao realized, was far from easy. The next day at school, Gao arrived to a worrying scene. Students were struggling to control the monsters they had brought with them. The most concerning was a giant pig, so massive that it blocked the entire entrance of the building. Struggling to control the monsters they had brought with them. The most concerning was a giant pig, so massive that it blocked the entire entrance of the building. One of the military coaches approached with his Jiarai wolf, similar to the one Colonel Chen had commanded before. Assessing the situation, the coach let out a terrifying growl and commanded the wolf to act. The wolf intimidated the pig, forcing it out of the way and clearing the entrance. The coach then calmly informed the students that the show was over and it was time to begin proper training. In the schoolyard, the first real lesson began. The coach explained that the most important aspect of being an imperial ambassador was forming a strong bond with their beasts. Without it, no amount of skill or strategy would make the monsters obey commands. He used his own silver moon wolf as an example. By providing its favorite food, exercising with it, and spending quality time together, the bond between them had grown strong. As a result, the wolf listened to his commands willingly. The coach emphasized that developing each monster's combat abilities was equally crucial, and that nurturing the connection between trainer and beast was the foundation for survival and success. Yesterday, the students had witnessed Colonel Chen's wolf smash an armor plate with just its tail. Yet, as impressive as that feat was, it was not even the wolf's true strength. The Silver Moon wolf had become strong through months of systematic training. Similarly, another coach's wolf displayed an extraordinarily powerful bite force, demonstrating that every beast had unique abilities to be honed. The coach explained that beasts were currently classified into 5 categories: attackers, defenders, supporters, healers, and field controllers. In reality, many species specialized in multiple categories, meaning that students needed to train their monsters to be at least capable in all areas. For initial training, they could use the materials shipped to the school to train by force. Gao, however, decided to focus on Dazi's defensive capabilities first. The art of body transfer allowed the centipede to absorb damage directed at Gao, making it his most important asset at present. As he considered how to strengthen this ability, Gao remembered reading about a species called fierce fist apes. Born with low defense, these apes were trained from birth to hit tree trunks with their own bodies. Over time, they progressed to rocks and then mountains, naturally hardening their bodies and forming thick calluses, effectively creating their own armor. Inspired by this method, Gao prepared to use a similar approach with Dazi. Pulling a massive hammer from one of the resource crates, he attempted to crush the napping centipede. Naturally, Dazi took off running, forcing Gao to chase him. When he finally caught up, he nearly dislocated his arm from the hammer's weight, realizing that perhaps Dazi wasn't the only one who needed training. A week later, Gao woke to the sound of Dazi smashing down his door, demanding breakfast immediately. Stepping out, he told the centipede to calm down and began cooking. Reflecting on the past week, Gao had to admit that the training had made both him and Dazi stronger and faster. Even Dazi had grown to level 10. Still, the intense training had taken a toll on his body and his wallet. Suddenly his phone rang. Eager to help, Dumbly picked it up and held it to Gao. On the other end was Lu Senin, the general manager of Blue Shield Security Company, a name Gao had never heard before. Curious, he listened as General Lu explained that he had an opportunity that could greatly benefit Gao and asked if they could meet in person. Despite having recently passed the monster trainer exam, landed a part-time consultant role at his older sister's company, and undergoing intense training to become an imperial ambassador, that night, he pondered the costs of feeding and evolving his monsters, and the next day he went to the Fune studio for the meeting. At the studio, Gao was greeted by Quan Quan and then introduced to Mr. Lu. Getting straight to business, Lu asked Gao to work as a monster trainer consultant for his company. Skeptical, Gao insisted they sit down and discuss terms first. He asked why they would want him when there were senior trainers in Chang'an City, not to mention other intermediate trainers. Lu, however, explained that he was looking for an up-and-coming talent like Gao, confident that his potential made him the best choice. Satisfied, Gao set his conditions. He would only work weekends, with exceptions for emergencies, and he would not sign any exclusivity contract. To his surprise, his terms were accepted almost instantly, and a contract was handed over. Gao could only wonder who owned the company to make such a generous offer without hesitation. Soon after, Quan informed Gao that Mr. Ma, who had an appointment with him, was waiting outside. Mr. Ma introduced his request. He had a level 3 plant-based beast, a flower demon which he wanted to evolve and enter into the Flower King competition in half a month. Gao was shocked that such a rare and majestic beast would be treated like a participant in a beauty pageant, but decided not to question it. May explained that this was his second beast, and he wished to provide it with the best possible life. Gao charged him the usual fee, triple the market value for such a service, and after obtaining the necessary ingredients from the store, he began the evolution process. After a short nerve-wracking wait, May and Quan returned to find that the flower demon had evolved into a regal level 4 beast, sitting confidently as if aware of its own majesty. May beamed with joy at the success. Gao Peng felt satisfied with the results, and Quan, flustered and blushing, watched the display in quiet admiration. Meanwhile, in an unknown location, a young lady listened disdainfully as others around her displayed their casual attitude toward life. She, however, had a single goal in mind, and was determined to do whatever it took to find a specific person. Back at the Cheney material shop, Gao Peng arrived to pick up his usual order of 30 pounds of cedar pine needles for Dumbly. Unfortunately, the store owner informed him that a shortage had occurred due to an infestation of villain spiders, which had appeared out of nowhere in the Black Ember Forest of Chan'an City. These spiders had destroyed crops and herbs, and were even devouring other monsters in the area. Filthy insects, Gao muttered, hungrier than me on a cheat day. As he left the store, Gao thought about recent events, the collaboration between the college and the military, the security company eager to recruit him, and now this outbreak. It seemed clear that something major was about to unfold. Just then his phone rang. It was Lu Sinan, summoning Gao to the Blue Shield Security Company building. Upon arriving, Gao learned that the new spiders, designated as brutal GY spiders, were attacking multiple resource sites in large numbers. To counter this, the government had mobilized several security companies and organizations to investigate and learn their weaknesses. Lu needed Gao to assist in strengthening their Imperial Beast reserves, noting that even reinforcing a few Devil Mantis would be a great boon. Gao was led to a floor housing about 100 Devil Mantis, and asked to put his best effort into selecting and training them. As he studied the mantises, Lu and a junior colleague discussed Gao's skill level, hoping it lived up to the high praise they had heard, as they were risking a lot relying on him. Just 10 minutes later, Gao had chosen the 10 most powerful mantises and requested they be separated into a lab, along with a list of resources for each. Lu was elated, seeing clear proof that Gao was indeed as impressive as promised, perhaps even more so. A little while later, before the day had ended, Gao had perfectly evolved the mantises into leader level 4 winged jade mantises. Lu's joy confirmed that recruiting Gao had been a remarkable decision. Meanwhile, at the training grounds where the colonel's team oversaw the students, Gao praised Dazi for his latest improvements in combat ability, while keeping an eye on classmates who had already begun slacking off. At that moment, a girl named Mutant approached him. Standing tall, she complimented Gao on how well he had trained Dazi and explained her purpose. With team battles scheduled for later stages of training, she wanted to form a partnership with him, seeing him as the only student as serious as she was. To demonstrate her strength, Mutant summoned her beast, Lotus Seed, a massive seal rhino with incredible defense, and one of only 2 elite quality beasts. Despite the rhino's extreme timidity, Gao recognized its potential as a tank. With Dazi improving his offensive capabilities, the rhino would perfectly round out their formation. Seeing that Gao accepted, Mutant was ecstatic and celebrated with a monstrous handshake that rattled him to his core. Outside, security teams had arrived at the Black Ember Forest to tackle the spider infestation. Manager Lu faced off against Captain Mu, a fierce rival, and after bickering, they approved a suppression shot into the forest. However, the Devil Mantis under Lu's supervision began acting terrified. Moments later, the reason became clear. A giant white-furred red-horned ape burst from the forest. This Lord-level monster, the true ruler of the Black Ember Forest, wreaked havoc on the Allied forces. Civilian members fled, but the military forces maintained their composure, deploying a golden killer beast, a giant bird monster with flaming breath, to force the ape back. Once the ape retreated, the security forces regrouped. A military officer instructed Lu to quickly gather his team, despite complaints about the need for civilian organizations. The superior officer reminded them that in the changing world, even civilians needed experiences like this to grow and prepare for an uncertain future. Later, a team of women worked through elite-class monsters inside a cave to conserve their beast's strength. Their leader arranged defensive beasts at the front, supporters in the center, and attackers on each flank. As they advanced, they eventually heard the sounds of fighting deeper within the cave. Rushing forward, they reached a high ledge that gave them an aerial view of the battle. Below, security forces were locked in combat with a mother spider that was birthing countless pests. Yet, this was only a hint of the true threat that awaited. The mother spider, despite her size, was a weak fighter for her class. Lu immediately led the charge against her, ordering long-range attackers to focus on her eyes while everyone else targeted the legs. However, the team quickly ran into a problem. The spider's eyes were shielded. "Well, that's just downright inconvenient," Lu muttered under his breath. On the battlefield, the captain of the female squad held her position, even as her comrades urged her to descend and assist. Something about the mother spider felt off to her, though she could not pinpoint exactly what. Finally, when the eye shield was broken, Lu commanded a full-force assault. But as the team began inflicting damage, the spider let out a shrill, piercing shriek that incapacitated everyone on the field. Observing the spider's aura, Lu realized the truth. The mother spider was evolving into a Lord-rank peak monster, and their attack had interrupted the evolutionary process. The only option now was to retreat. For once, the military and security teams made the realistic decision to flee. Roughly 3 hours after the initial forces entered the cave, the teams outside began to grow anxious. Suddenly they spotted a beast racing toward them. The military officer immediately went on guard, signaling all troops to prepare for battle. Fortunately, it was a false alarm. The approaching creature was a devil mantis with Manager Lu riding atop it. After landing and catching his breath, Lu grabbed the nearest government official in frustration, demanding to know why they had sent his team into what was no ordinary low-level spider. It was a devil spider evolving into a Lord-rank monster. The military officer separated the two and asked Lu to explain. Lu recounted the disastrous events. The mother spider's mid-evolution power had decimated their forces, and even their best beasts had been lost inside the cave. As if that weren't enough, several subordinates were missing. Turning to the government officials, the officer demanded to know why the spider had been misreported as a low-combat power creature. "They lied," came the predictable answer. Thankfully, one of Lu's men had returned, explaining that they had been scattered while fleeing. The officers discussed how a larger, better-prepared force could have captured the spider as a trained asset. Now, they would have to wait for nature to take its course. The leader beast of the Black Ember Forest, the giant ape, would have to handle the mother spider in due time. Back at the academy, Gao Peng was showing tremendous growth with Dazi. Thinking of the forest expedition Lu had undertaken with the Allied forces, Gao worried about how the increasing demand for hunting was inflating monster corpse prices. To keep up, he needed to advance his monsters to leader rank and earn his senior monster trainer certificate. Meanwhile, Dazi continued training. Mutant offered Gao a guidebook she had made to study their beast's abilities, mostly over-enthusiastic notes, but she had the right spirit. An announcement soon interrupted their session. The first phase of training had ended, and slackers were to be expelled. True to form, students who had shown little dedication were sent out despite protests. The second phase, practical training, was about to begin. Students were to form groups of 5. 2 particularly competitive students immediately moved toward Gao and Mutant, claiming them as teammates. As groups familiarized themselves, Instructor Zhang Renai approached Gao's team. He would oversee their practical training, and his first lesson promised to be brutal. Zhang presented a terrifying level 9 steel pig, resembling a mammoth. Gao, Mutant, and their new teammates shared a common fear of the beast, and when they requested a different monster, Zhang offered a seemingly innocent hyena. Gao, however, recognized it as a level 10 elite bloodhound, poison immune and far more dangerous than the pig. To protect Dazi from disadvantage, Gao volunteered to take the pig first. As the cage opened, the steel pig charged furiously. Gao remained calm, commanding Dazi forward. The centipede maneuvered around the pig's legs and climbed onto its back, snapping viciously at the mammoth-like creature. The pig managed to throw Dazi off, leaving him vulnerable on the ground. Gao's new teammates showed varying degrees of concern, but it was unnecessary. Even as the pig attacked, Dazi was already asserting control, injecting it with poison. The more violently the pig fought, the more the poison spread. Before long, the steel pig collapsed, and Zhang Renai observed the blue tinge on its face, clear evidence of poisoning. He praised Gao for Dazi's training but cautioned him not to rely too heavily on poison. Overdependence could cripple Dazi against poison-immune foes. Instructor Zhang also took note of how Gao Peng was raising Dazi, more like a loyal companion than a combat tool. That centipede and him could be best friends for life, he muttered to himself. Next up was the skinny guide. He didn't even have a proper name yet, so they just called him Sweater Vest. After some bickering with the fat guide, Sweater Vest sent his yellow-tailed scorpion to face the steel pig. The pig was still poisoned from Dazi's earlier attack. Using its poison needle, the scorpion managed to bring the pig down, but in the process, the scorpion also collapsed. The combination of the pig's residual poison and the effects of Dazi's attack had knocked it out. Meanwhile, the fat guide's beast fared no better. In fact, it had developed a strange attachment to the pig's unconscious body. The fat guide sighed as he tried to heal his creature, while Sweater Vest worked on reviving his own scorpion. Gao and Mutant shared a conversation amidst the chaos. While instructor Jang facepalmed at the absurd scene. Leading this team is going to be a nightmare, he thought. Back at Gao Pang's apartment, Dumby was perched in front of the fridge, constantly opening it and searching for food as if it would magically appear. Gao usually stopped him, but the little ape was just too silly and cute to interfere with. Just then, Gao's phone rang. The number belonged to the Monster Hunting Association. Curious, he answered, expecting Yingyu to call about the cedar pine needles. Instead, an automated message informed him that the task he posted had been completed, and that the items would be arriving at the pickup location at the scheduled time. Gao was thrilled. He quickly sped out of his apartment, worrying that if this kept up, he might need to find Dumby an alternative evolutionary route. As Gao collected his parcel from the delivery robot, a group of sketchy individuals watched from the shadows. They had followed the cedar pine needle shipment all the way from the association's warehouse, intending to rob whoever was buying such expensive materials. One thug hesitated, but their leader shut him up, and promptly knocked him out as an example. Later that night, the three thugs sneaked into Gao's building. They wondered why someone so rich lived in such a rundown neighborhood. As they tried to break into his apartment, a neighbor, Tong Tong, opened her door to investigate the noise. The thugs stammered excuses, but the leader saw an opportunity, grabbed Tong Tong, and forced his way inside with his men. Surprisingly, she seemed calm and accommodating. Then her entire aura shifted. "The soundproof walls will keep your noise in," she said, as a terrifying silhouette appeared behind her. Her beast, a chameleon, readied itself for battle. The thugs were immediately terrified. The leader regained his composure and rushed Tong Tong with a knife, only for her to effortlessly knock it away. One thug sent forward his hedgehog pet to assist, but the chameleon instantly devoured it. The thugs could do nothing but cry out in horror. Before the chaos could escalate further, the leader unleashed a bullet rat at Tong Tong and her beast. To his shock, she remained completely unharmed, save for a slightly tattered dress. In a single instant, her expression shifted to pure death itself. Next door, Gao Pang groaned at the noise. "Guess that soundproofing thing was a lie," he muttered. Meanwhile, Tong Tong called someone named Old Chi, instructing him to have the thugs picked up and sent to work at the border. The following day, Gao and his team continued practical training. Dazi was exhausted from trying to break through a water bear bug's defenses. Even Sweater Vest and Fatso's beasts were down for the count. This creature had evolved to survive extreme conditions, and Gao considered it as a potential third beast. However, he realized its abilities did not synergize with Dazi and Dumby. A long-range healing or flying-type beast would complement his current team far better. He noticed that Mutant and her steel rhino were showing significant improvement. Her beast's timidity noticeably reduced. Just then, Manager Lu called, suspiciously flattering Gao and inviting him to meet some of his friends. Considering the recent losses from the Black Ember Forest, Gao decided to go. After school, Lu picked Gao up at the gates and revealed that his daughter was actually Gao's classmate. He asked Gao to assist her with her beast if he had time. Gao noted that her beast was a rare cat type, and told her she could visit the studio on weekends, making her extremely happy. When they dropped her off at home, Gao grew suspicious of Lu's intentions. "Who exactly are these friends?" he asked. Lu simply smiled and replied, "You will know when you meet them." Eventually, Gao and Lu arrived at a restaurant with a beautifully landscaped garden. Gao immediately noticed the subtle mastery of both northern and southern garden styles. It was clear the venue was made for distinguished guests. Inside the private room, Gao was introduced to some serious big shots. Captain Song Si of the Firefly hunting team, Captain Django of the Skyar Hunters, and several other NPCs. They immediately looked down on him, as if a child had been invited to dine with adults. Manager Lu acted as the mediator, trying to get the dinner started despite the condescending stares and doubt from the other captains. At the dinner, Django noticed Gao's displeased expression and immediately pressed him on it. Before the tension could escalate, Captain Song stepped in to scold Django for bullying a student. Manager Lu quickly interjected as well, claiming he hadn't properly scheduled this meeting with Gao, which was why the boy wasn't expecting it. The excuse worked well enough for Django to back down, at least for the moment. But things soon shifted in a different, equally frustrating direction. Django commented on how difficult Gao was to get in touch with and suggested that Gao could do him a favor someday, given his skills. The other guests quickly jumped on the bandwagon, one after another, making it clear this was no ordinary dinner. Gao realized the truth. This was not a friendly gathering, but a ploy to exploit his abilities. After all the value he had created for Lu, this was how he was repaid. As the meal continued, Django pushed further, bringing up the rumors of Gao's exceptional skill. Gao answered modestly, saying anyone could visit his company for a consultation. That only made matters worse. Django insisted that since they were all friends, Gao should provide his services outside of company dealings. The others eagerly agreed, voicing thinly veiled demands. Fed up, Gao stood and walked out. The group followed him into the hall, where Lu apologized and offered him a ride. Gao declined, saying he had already booked a car, and left without sparing a glance at the so-called captains. Once Gao was gone, Jiangu lingered behind. It turned out the entire setup had been orchestrated by Lu, whose aim was to sour Gao against other organizations and bind him more tightly to Blue Shield. Jiangu had played along because he owed Lu a debt. Even so, as he returned to the table, Jiangu couldn't help but reflect Lu truly lived up to his title of Old Fox. That night, back in his apartment, Gao tried to relax by watching the news. A report covered the Blue Devil genetic liquid, a new product from the John Bang Group, marketed as a wonder drug for beasts. It had turned into a disaster. The formula contained toxic ingredients that caused dangerous mutations and injuries, leading to a nationwide recall. As the broadcast continued, Gao's phone rang. It was Lu Sunlin. After a pause, Gao answered. As expected, Lu apologized for what happened at the restaurant, trying to take the blame himself. Gao said he wasn't too upset, but Lu continued flattering him, insisting that any disrespect to Gao was disrespect to himself. Gao cut him off mid-sentence and hung up. Standing in his apartment, Gao felt frustrated. He didn't blame others for trying to manipulate him. That was human nature. What angered him was his own lack of strength. If he were stronger, he could simply dismiss such people. For now, he resolved to play by the rules until the day he could act on his own terms. The news shifted to the latest Dog King competition. The champion was a 21-year-old who had raised his wolf beast to level 39, reaching the leader rank. It was a stark reminder of how far Gao still had to go. That weekend, Gao was in his studio, preparing a concoction for Dumby. After finishing the brew, he handed the ape a test tube and instructed him to drink. The mixture looked disgusting, but Dumby obediently swallowed it. At that very moment, Jia Yu Lu's daughter arrived at the studio with two friends. They chatted outside, commenting on the lack of customers and Gao's rumored high prices. But before they could step inside, an overwhelming aura washed over them, suffocating in its intensity. Inside the studio, Dumby had evolved again. He had transformed into a level 16 perfect quality skeleton dead ape, with a new acquired trait, Blood Silk Heart. The ability passively strengthened him, and when activated, allowed him to manipulate his heartbeat to devastating effect. The evolution was impressive, but Gao immediately noticed a problem. Dumby's size had grown enormous. When Gao opened the door to fetch Quan Quan for help, he found Jia Yu and her friends standing outside. For a moment he suspected Lu had sent her to gauge his mood. But Jia Yu's casual attitude proved she knew nothing of the recent incident. Gao treated her kindly as a friendly acquaintance. When she requested his help evolving her beast, he explained the price and rules, then offered to cover the material costs himself out of respect for her father. Her beast, a timid cat, reacted poorly to Dumby's presence, cowering in fear until Jia Yu called to it. Then, in a bizarre display, the cat leapt straight into her chest with a mischievous grin. Gao raised an eyebrow at the strangely perverse behavior, but let it pass. Meanwhile, his attention shifted to the pet of Jia Yu's friend, a floating jellyfish-like creature. She explained that it was harmless, but carried a unique spatial storage ability, essentially a living bottomless wallet. Gao immediately recognized the immense potential of such a beast. When she mentioned they were sold at Wuku Square's Commercial Street, Gao knew at once what his third beast would be.